What is the lowest point you've reached in your life? How did you get there? Where are you now? I was sitting in an about to be repossessed, with a drained savings account car holding a $300 inoxicant that I had just purchased using a cash advance on a maxed out credit card. I was debating whether to shoot them up throughout the week or take them all at once. I took them all at once, thinking that I could die but also not caring too much. I had a boss that saw I was in trouble and gave me a choice, rehab or unemployment. I checked myself into rehab the next day and haven't looked back. Been clean and sober ever since. That was 2012. AA and rehab saved my life. I made a promise to myself that I would never go back to rehab. It was too embarrassing. My dad picked me up when I was released and he had the look of sadness mixed with disappointment. He died shortly after that and never saw me at my happiest. He never met his grandchildren. I feel guilty for putting my family through some crap, but I don't dwell on it too much. I have a wife now, we both have great jobs, we have 2 young children, a house, and everyone is healthy and happy. I'm happy you've turned yourself around. I'm sure your dad would be proud. 2015. I worked at a horrible job with a horrible boss who thought it was funny to say things like, "Is it because you're black?" and refer to me as her N-word. I was in a situationship that ended explosively, and a bunch of horrible things from your childhood that I'd repressed bubbled up to the surface. I found myself thinking about suicide frequently. Not just the occasional thought, but actively planning how I was going to die. I went to the doctors for something completely unrelated and she asked how I was doing and I bawled. Literally word diarrhea about all the horrible things happening. I cried. My doctor cried. I got an immediate referral to therapy and was medicated for a bit. I'm doing much better now. I'm no longer medicated and we have some bad days, but never anything as scary as what I was feeling in 2015. Things could be a little bit better, but overall I'm happy with my life now. It's not much, but it's mine. It's not much, but it's mine. I quite like this. Take care. I have OCD and before I accepted it and bought into treatment would get a lot of intrusive thoughts. My cousin killed himself and along with being depressed my intrusive thoughts were of the topic of suicide. After about a week that was essentially one long panic attack. My wife drove me to the hospital and told me to check myself in or else she would report me as a danger to myself. At the time, that was the worst day of my life. Looking back now with 20/20 hindsight and a far healthier perspective, it was probably the best day. It's amazing that you have someone that will rescue you even if you don't want it. That's the kind of stuff you gotta remember when you get in little petty arguments. That's kind of off topic, but it's real. 17 and pregnant with incredible shame. Raised in a very religious house. My family was struggling financially and my parents' marriage was crumbling. I think I got there because of a combination of a desperate need for love and attention and abstinence-only education. My baby is now in middle school and in the gifted and talented program. He's thriving. I can't express what a wonder he is. His dad and I are married and have another son who is our wild child full of energy and goodness. I'm graduating college in December. My husband is a fabulous teacher at the high school down the road. We've had lows, but we learned so much along the way that I really don't regret it. Definitely don't recommend it. Wear protection, kids. I was scared the dad wouldn't be there for a minute. Sat down and went into deep thought and realized who I really was and hated myself. Kept a suicide video log. Considered it a couple of times. Tried it once. Obviously failed. And still going through it, but it's getting better. I'm glad you're working through things. I don't know you, but I do know the world and people who love you would be worse off without you. Things can and do get better. I was in a cult-like church for about 7 years. I was struggling with depression and anxiety and I was basically kicked out because they didn't want to deal with it. Now I'm happily married, have a great job, and have both anxiety and depression in check. A blessing in disguise. Oh crap, I can answer this. Just left my abusive ex-husband, 32 with no home or job prospects, 2 small kids, starting over with only the goodwill of family. Thinking about going back to him. I went through a lot and learned that a lot of the things people are afraid of aren't even the bottom. Figured out that the bottom is where it ends, and as long as you draw breath the bottom can never be reached. It gives me hope. And now that I'm doing better, I can approach things with a different perspective. ETA, I should have been clearer. I left in 2016 and struggled about going back for most of that year. BC I made a vow and we need a whole family. I made some choices Reddit would prob skin me alive for, but I'm whole and happy now and every day looks better. Thanks for your care and concern. For your kids too. Don't go back. 8 months ago I wound up in the ICU. Long story short, I started feeling very strange at work. Asked someone if they could drive me to urgent care. Urgent care said here's the nearest emergency rooms. Which one would you like to go to? Not if, but which. Got to the ER and they sent me upstairs to the ICU. Simply put, my blood pressure was twice what it should have been. Bad habits, unhealthy living, and stress. There's this surreal moment when you realize that the doctors are simultaneously trying to keep you calm and saying to themselves, holy crap, this guy's in trouble. I didn't die, but it was touch and go for a while. Now I'm on a lot of medication and have made some big changes to my lifestyle. Coming within shouting distance of dying is a hell of a motivation. Probably being a homeless junkie living in a tent. No clothes, no food, other than what was given to me while panhandling. All I was doing was making what money I could to stay well. Didn't even get high anymore. Just wanted to not be sick. Almost been 2 years and I still cringe thinking about it. I've had a few. Teenage years were tough. After my mother died when I was 21, I felt I hit rock bottom. Wanted out, but scrambled my way up as my little girl needed me. Then my stepdad went, my nan, my aunt, then my best friend, all within 3 years they all died. So I felt like every time I stood up, I got knocked back down. But I did get up. Then a few years later my, now, ex stole all my hard-earned money as he was a drug addict, and he ran. I wanted to curl up and die, as he'd emotionally abused me for a long time. 10 years later, I'm still fighting. I'm homeless with 3 kids, staying with friend ATM, but I am not rock bottom. I'm hovering close, but still fighting. I've been in a similar situation a couple of times. If you need some help, hit me up. I don't have any money, but depending on where you are I can give you some tips on where you can eat, bathe, supplies for the young ones, etc. My parents disowned me just before senior year, college, and I ended up on the street doing sex work after I almost immediately lost my job. I am still working as a prostitute, but I almost went back this semester. I registered for classes but withdrew because I thought a court case was going to interfere with school. Luckily it was dropped, so I will be back next semester. I also changed my name legally to a super generic and difficult to search name. Think Gene Doe, and did some other things so they can never find me. I know they regretted their decision later and were looking for me, but they will never find me. They told me I was dead to them and I am taking them at their word. Dang, that's some hard crap. I'm so glad you're doing better now. From living alone, in filth, with no cooking skills and often just getting by on water for days at a time for about half a year as I lived my life in MMO roleplay while constantly contemplating suicide, to now being in a great relationship that's already nearing 6 years, strong in a nice home, and my cooking skills have vastly improved too. Cooking is really therapeutic at home. As someone who does it for both work and pleasure, cooking at home really is just calming. I'm glad you got better. Keep it up. I am at my lowest point in my life. In short, 1. My mom kicked me out of the house because I didn't like her BF, and in court started saying that she kicked me out because I punched her. 2. I live with the constant pressure of everyone saying that I have to forgive my mom, because that's the only way I heal. But I don't want and I never will forgive her. 3. I broke up with my ex. I just noticed that I lived a lie in that relationship. 4. I'm losing lots of friends. 5. The ones that I'm not losing are having family issues, or are getting really sick. 6. Despite everyone saying I'm here for you and everything, I feel rather lonely and I am only noticing right now. Lowest point was 2016. Went to the hospital because my bosses thought I had a concussion. Blood on my pillows, no focus, etc. Brought me to the hospital at noon and had blood work done. Doctor asked me to talk in a private room. Asked me a bunch of questions that I answered. Did balance tests, blood pressure, etc. He then asks me when the last time I've drank anything. I truthfully answer the night before. He then informs me that my back is 0.548 and that usually they'd be pumping my stomach at 0.4. I don't have the shakes, I'm not slurring, I'm coherent, and I don't smell like booze. I stayed in the hospital for 4 days and elected to go home with blood pressure through the roof. When waiting to go home with my family, the nurses told my family that I hadn't slept once since I had been there. They were concerned and had asked the other nurses to see if I was sleeping on any of the other shifts, which I wasn't. This all got me to stay sober for a couple months. I'd like to say it got better, but I started drinking again and it got worse. Started to have large seizures. My family gave up and cut off all communication. I became homeless. My first night checking in the shelter I saw a bum fight. Soon after, someone walked up to me and asked if I wanted to go to a meeting. I told them that I'd tried it before and it didn't work. What do you have to lose? I went to the meeting and slept on his couch for a bit and started going to a bunch of meetings on the bus. Over 400 in my first 90 days. I've been sober over 1,000 days now, live with my fiance who's is over a decade and a half sober. Looking to buy a new car and move into a new house next year. I have a great job and I've been blessed to have a better life than I could ever deserve. Life is grand because of God and AA. Never forget that guy that asked you to go that night. I am actually in my lowest point, going through a divorce and fighting for custody of my 2 little boys. It's rough as heck right now, but I know it'll get better. Finally got a good job that I love, so that's a start. Actually, I am at my lowest point right now. I was suicidal for as long as I can remember and nobody cared to help. I only got bullied, so I had to deal with everything on my own. Hope things are looking up. Hit me up if you need to talk. At the moment, I have been wanting to move out of London for a while. Despite this, I am encouraged to stay in London for my wife. We get an expensive shared ownership place. For your information, I freaking hate London. My wife finds a job up north and says it's our opportunity to move away from London. My wife moves up north. I stay in London. I kinda hate my job. I try and fail to get a job up north. Next door neighbor develops a cough from smoking heavily. He literally won't stop coughing. I get sleep deprived. I get depressed from now being socially isolated and sleep deprived. I finally quit my job and move up north after my wife says it'll be best for my mental health. 4 weeks later she dumps me saying she wants her freedom. I was the least controlling of husbands. It's been 2 weeks she broke up with me. No job, no wife and still an expensive mortgage to pay. I am now applying for jobs all over the UK, except fricking London. I fear I may have to go back to London. Lowest point of life was those times when I couldn't even afford food daily. Right now I'm making close to $5k per month. Never forget where you came from and never give up. I recall the days of no food for me. Must feed the wife so she can make milk for the baby. Years of that and it all worked out. Now I'm fat and happy and joke about those days. Poverty is slimming. Hang in there all. Work at any jobs you can and keep your eyes on the prize. Peace. After having my youngest son, 4 now, I suffered from postpartum depression. My doctor told me that as long as I was still taking care of my kids that I was okay. Fast forward 3 years, my mental health had been on a slow decline. I was still taking care of my kids so I thought I was fine, so I just tried to tough it out. I ran into the man that molested me when I was 13, and I completely spiraled. My husband was on the road working on the pipeline, so I had no support. If I was at home I was in the bed. I would call out of work for a week at a time telling them I was sick, but in reality I just couldn't get out of the bed. And I eventually quit my job. I still took care of my 2 kids because they needed me, but I done the bare minimum. My house was a disaster. My kids would beg me to do fun things, but I just couldn't face the world, so we never went anywhere fun, nor did I even play with them anymore. It was the worst 6 months of my life, and probably my kids' lives as well. Thankfully it has been a year since I hit rock bottom and I am doing so much better. My entire life my dad had been mentally abusive and I guess I just ignored it for a long time. But around the middle of 6th grade a bunch of crap started happening where people were saying fricked up stuff to me. My dad started yelling on the daily. which caused me to have anxiety attacks anytime anyone raises their voice at me. And among all of that, I was questioning my gender and sexuality. I was in a really dark place and didn't really tell anyone about it. I wasn't eating more than what my parents made me eat. All of this stuff led me into a really dark place, and eventually I started cutting and was contemplating suicide. At some point, I met my best friend. She helped me so much. She was always there for me to talk to, and she helped me through some of the hardest nights. Eventually, I got back up from that dark place and I actually started enjoying life and looking forward to things. Every now and then, I have anxiety attacks and days where I just don't feel great emotionally, but compared to 3 years ago, I'm doing a lot better. I was a college freshman when my mom kicked me out of the house. I had 3 jobs, but all were part-time minimum wage jobs that were putting gas in my car and paying for school. I couldn't get loans because my parents made too much money, so I had to make payments or I'd be kicked out. I tried to prove that they weren't helping me out financially, but without an address of my own it was hopeless. I ended up living in my car. I showered at the school gym and moved my car around the parking lot at the advice of security, who luckily looked the other way. I had to dumpster dive for dinner. I ended up doing things that I was reluctant to for extra money, like posing for art students and selling pills on occasion. Eventually I was allowed to move back home. I also got decent enough grades that my financial aid officer found a grant I qualified for, which bought the books and supplies that I needed but couldn't afford. My mom would kick me out again, but at that point I had started dating my husband and I ended up moving in with him. I think that at the time when I was going through it, I was so tired and defeated. It was just school and work. I didn't have time or energy for much else. I wanted to die. I didn't attempt suicide, but I was reckless as heck. It was having a goal, to finish college, that kept me going. Knowing that at the end of the fricked up situation I would be different. I was going to be better for having seen myself through. It wasn't about the degree. It was the journey and proving to myself that I could handle it. I could handle whatever crap life threw at me. So yeah, if you're going through heck, keep going. It's not a good place to stop. Which may or may not be something Winston Churchill said. The rules surrounding independent versus dependent students are stupid as frick. I'm sorry. I was being abused by my boyfriend, raped, and beaten, and I worked as a prostitute to fund my crack C&H habit. Then I was made homeless, and the boyfriend left. I stopped turning tricks because I felt degraded, checked myself into a refuge and spent a few months getting back on my feet. That was 2 and a bit years ago. I now have a flat, a boyfriend who worships the ground I walk on, a job in a rehab facility, and friends. Don't judge me or anything, please. I was in grade 2. I know, very young, and I wanted to kill myself. I didn't know how. If I knew how to, I would have done it. Now I am in my first year of grade 9. I hope you are doing better. Stick around. I wrapped birthday presents for myself, sang birthday songs to myself with a cupcake I baked for myself, and then unwrapped the presents and acted all surprised at what I got. Then I just broke down and cried. This is how I spent my 21st birthday and my 27th birthday. I didn't bother celebrating my other birthdays. The 27th was because I invited people I thought were friends over, but they ditched me. So I just ended up keeping the little goodie bags I made them for myself and basically told myself I'll never trust or open up to anyone again. So far, been going better, and I don't regret it at all. Relationships, friendships, and stuff like that in my life have always ended poorly. I know the saying that if everyone smells like crap, check under your shoe. Well, I try my best not to be offensive or mean to people. I hope I don't upset anyone, but I feel like it's better if I just don't have friends or connect with anyone. Some people are meant to be alone, I guess, and I'm one of them. Had to give up on some hopes and dreams, but if it means I can be happy, well, so be it. A few years ago I sliced my arm open downwards. I panicked after and got medical assistance. Afterwards was the lowest part, where I felt like I was in a pit of despair and self-loathing with no way out. I couldn't even kill myself properly. I felt hopeless. Years and years of mental illness, a lifetime of not understanding what the frick was so different with my brain, never fitting in, my mother's alcoholism, worried my husband was gonna get deported, and a dead-end job I barely held on to turned me in a bitter, lonely, messed up person. But things turned around. I threw myself into therapy. It took a while to find the right one, but I eventually found one that helped me change my life. Got a medication that worked for me and got diagnosed with autism at age 24, which answered a lot of questions I'd always had about myself. Now I'm a mum to a beautiful baby boy and I'm in the best place mentally I've ever been. Oh, and the scar on my arm is covered with a beautiful tattoo that both reminds me of my son and makes me feel attractive and cool. I'm so glad I chickened out of suicide. The thought of missing out on my son giggling with joy when he sees me is worse than anything I went through to get here. Was suicidal in university in the 90s. Never attempted but kept planning it and was probably 24 hours away from going through with it many times. Not gonna lie when I say Ally McBeal saved my life. Please laugh, because it's hilarious. But it's freaking true. I'd never encountered a show so fresh and modern and honest and clumsy. I watched it religiously, recorded it, watched it again and again. I thought, if this nutty fictional woman can exist in this fictional world, why can't I? Over time my suicidal thoughts dissipated. I went to therapy. Haven't been suicidal in 20 years. I'm now married to the most amazing human in the world, going on 13 years. I have few close friends, but they're very close and wonderful people. I'm an exec at a Fortune 10 company, making frick money, traveling the world for work to places like London and Tokyo. Every day is a blessing. After college, when I was working 60+ hours a week at low paying jobs and drowning in debt, it didn't help that I graduated college during the middle of the Great Recession. Eventually I got my debt paid down and saved up enough to go back to school for my masters. Got a decent job after graduating the second time and couldn't be happier with my career. Eating throwing up ice cream 2-3 times a week in college and saving the vomit in doubled Walmart bags to throw away when no one was home. My secret cat looking me in the eyes after. I don't know if that's me at my worst. Life is long. But I'm okay now. With food anyway. Still learning how to handle my emotions and stress correctly. After my divorce in '98 I was down for a while. I worked myself relentlessly, crushing my sadness down as hard as I could by working and working out and hiking. I smashed myself mentally and physically, so my mental and physical exhaustion made me pass out and sleep. I figured out that I only failed, not that I was a failure. 21 years later I am retired and retired well. Happy with times of sorrow like anyone can be, but I never lost myself. I found my way home, I guess you could say, and home is a nice place. A few years ago I was so depressed I could barely move. My boyfriend was literally changing my PJs for me and cleaning my teeth, like I was a small child. I don't remember it that well, but I remember just this overwhelming feeling of shame and gratitude. I don't know if I would have survived if I'd lived alone. I couldn't take SSRIs because they gave my psychotic symptoms, so I got put on bipolar meds that made me so apathetic I didn't eat for days. I barely existed. I was an empty vessel. I'm in a much better place now. I'm getting therapy. We're happy, and we live in a lovely apartment. I've recently started a new job I love and we're planning our 10-year anniversary trip. 3-year toxic relationship with my ex. Physical violence, broken bones, mental abuse, personal property and home destroyed. False allegations through vindictiveness and a resulting criminal record, narrowly avoiding jail time and expensive legal fees. Few months later and currently renovating my home and removing all traces of their damage. Sometimes spending company with a couple of close friends. No faith in a future relationship. All hope lost. Generally keep to myself and trust nobody. Besides my husband, I have no friends, and I have chose that for myself because of various things that happened to me in the past. I don't trust people either. I'm by no means downplaying your situation. I'm sorry that life has dealt you a cruel hand. Became addicted to age full 18-20 after moving in with a manipulative boyfriend. Eventually got arrested, kicked out of school and on the street for a bit. Strongly contemplated suicide before deciding to move across the country where my dad is. Now 10 years later, engaged with a job I love. Habitual pot smoker, but in my own house with my pets and love. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.